the fig tree down. It's not bearing any fruit.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the Frontline with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, as always, joined by Joe Resinello. And once more, dear brothers and sisters, let us go into the breach. Disgrazia.
They will not allow Donald Trump to be president. This is the twisted mind of the left. You're putting a Band-Aid over a problem that's not being addressed. It's thrown around too liberally, hate speech. Just because your feelings are hurt doesn't mean it's hate speech. So there are issues here that cross political lines.
It means that your libtard friends are not going to invite you over for Grey Goose and Pavois.
If you think that America is about you, you're just fool.
I got to show you something that has me aggravated. Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the Frontline with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo and Joe Resinello. And once more, dear brothers and sisters, let us go into the breach. Wow, Joe, this has been some week, I got to say. My analogy is always the same. The left is serving up a big ribeye dinner, and we're just tearing it apart on the bone. We're just like a bunch of barbarians, okay? There's been so much this week, but let's start first and foremost with DJT. Let's start with the Orange Man, okay? The left is obviously gleeful that Trump is going to be indicted, that they're seething for the moment where they're going to have a perp walk, where they're going to have there's going to be a mug shot. You know, Joe, everybody's got to kind of take a step back here a little bit. Even Joe Tacopina was on CNN. He's one of Trump's lawyers. Joe Tacopina said, look, you got Secret Service involved here and all sorts of things. Don't think this is going to be like a regular day at the races. I'm paraphrasing him, okay? But it is a moment that the left knows, in my opinion, Joe, and I want yours, the left knows this is going to come to nothing. That whether it be the statute of limitations, whether it be on shaky legal ground because it's really a misdemeanor, he's lumping it in with a felony. That this guy Alvin Bragg he's playing his part. He's playing his part in the Soros drama. That's what he is. By the way, Joe, you know, if you say that now, if you go against Bragg, you're a racist. If you go against Soros-backed Bragg, you're a racist and an anti-Semite. I just want to throw that out there because they have no recourse. Because our arguments against this nonsense, this political theater, are just solid. And I think it's not going to amount to much, but we'll see on Tuesday, Joe.
Couple points. I've looked around, you know, on different channels, not just conservative ones, to get the opinions. I've listened to lawyers. This is a weak case. Very weak. To your point, it happened 7 years ago. It's a misdemeanor that they had to basically do some twisting and turning to turn it into a felony. And they're relying on a witness that has a bad reputation with regard to telling the truth. Cohen.
Right.
It's a weak case. And I've listened from MSNBC to CNN to Fox, all across. I've heard lawyers on liberal stations say this. So, a couple things to conclude based upon that. One, the left overplayed their hand. They don't know when to stop. They usually do. Two, they want a reaction. This is what Glenn Beck says. They want a reaction. They didn't get the effect from January 6th. They want a reaction from people. And frankly, I don't think they're going to get it.
I'm with you.
I don't. But that's something they may want.
Joe, real quick, I'm gonna kick it right back.
I just want to make another point. Maybe they actually, because I think, and I heard this on CNN yesterday, that they think this will propel him to get the nomination. Maybe they want him to. Maybe they think they could beat him, and they can't beat DeSantis. Just some thoughts.
Right.
Because ultimately, he's not going to jail. He's not going to jail.
But they want the theater, Joe. They want the theater.
I know, but you got to. These are people. They're thinking too. I would think anyway. If they're just doing things to do that, then they're idiots, and they're not, because they're winning. People who win and succeed are not dumb. Believe me, Even if you don't like them, they're winning and they have won. So the point is, there has to be a thought process behind it. Um, I don't know.
Joe, I got to ask you this. I started out a few months ago at the front line with Joe and Joe Pasillo, Joe Rossinello in the breach, saying, I don't know. Pardon me out there, everybody. I'm feeling a little under the weather, but we'll get through this. I don't know, Joe. I was like, well, let's look at DeSantis. Let's look at Christine Nome. Let's look at this one. Let's look at Nikki Haley. Let's look at all these people. And I'm like, all right, let's give them a look. Joe, I'm coming to the conclusion that Trump is the person for this moment in history.
Oh, I agree with you, Joe.
I really believe that.
100%.
I don't trust DeSantis as much as I do trust Trump. I will get some things, and you will get some things we want from DeSantis. I think we'd get good judges from DeSantis. Okay. I think we'd get some good things. I just don't think he's the guy for this moment. Joe, we're going to talk about a little bit more about guns. We're going to talk about the trans movement and how violent it's actually getting. Joe, it's all coming to a head. A blind man can see it. This country's finished. And it's going to be a matter of what form this country takes. Is MTG right? You're going to have a national divorce? Or are people just going to move out of red states, blue states to red states and vice versa and have a de facto divorce? We're still one nation, but really like it's a de facto divorce. I never stepped foot in California or New York. You know what I mean? It's going to be interesting to see, but I do believe that in terms of the left and the amount that they're pushing now, Joe, they're unreasonable now. They have been unreasonable. They're even more so if that's possible. And I think Trump's the only guy at this moment in history that's capable of fighting it. And you know who else I think knows that, Joe? They do. That's why he's being indicted on Tuesday, because they need to tear him down because they know he could win.
Well, I'll tell you what. As it stands, because of voter law, what do I mean by that? Mail-in ballot laws and ballot harvesting laws in Nevada, in Arizona, in Pennsylvania, and in Michigan on the books right now. And one could even debate Georgia, but I'm not going to include them. I'm going to include those four.
Okay.
The way it stands right now, I don't think a Republican, anyone, could win because of the law. I'm not talking about fraud. I'm talking about as the law stands.
Right.
Now, let me say this. I'll use a historical reference. Winston Churchill was thrown out of English politics. He was thrown away. And then there was an event that took place. Germany bombed London. And all of a sudden, he became relevant again. It was a tidal wave that pushed him in to the prime ministership, and history was written. An event caused Trump to lose, an unforeseeable event, and it was a global pandemic that turned out to be a power grab for the world. World governments all over the West took power away from people and still are doing it today. You know, there's an old saying, man plans and God laughs. An event can take place as the election draws near, because I don't think either Trump or DeSantis still has a shot because of the law. Mail-in ballots. I don't think they could win.
Well, Governor Lombardi in Nevada, he actually passed legislation recently that addresses some of that, because he's a Republican governor.
I know.
And now I don't know how. I didn't get into the whole thing, Joe Rossinello. I didn't get into all the details, but at least somebody's bringing it to the forefront.
Well, it's important. That's the first and listen, if they don't address that, forget it. But
here, let me ask you the flip side. I want to ask you something. Let's say they do address it. What's the result then?
I'll tell you what. You know what you have to be willing to bear. They're going to call you a racist, and you have to say fine. And you have to say this: it's not about citizens; it's about undocumented people. That's all this is about. That's why the border is open.
Right.
You know, in Rhode Island, they actually have a bill put, what's it called, in place whereby undocumented people can vote legally in Rhode Island.
I don't believe it. I mean, I can't believe
I
it.
mean, that is
I just
insane, but
right,
that's what this is about.
right.
So, unless you address that and basically shout them down with, I don't care what you say, you have to pay taxes in this country, which means you have to have a social security number. And if you don't, you can't vote. Do I even have to say that?
Yes, you do
But you
nowadays.
do. And you have to say it as boldly as I just said it. And if they're not willing to do that, they're not going to win. But again, getting to the event, say Iran nukes Israel, say China invades Taiwan, say Russia uses a nuclear bomb against the Ukraine. That could be the Winston Churchill moment, whereby people say, Trump, it doesn't matter about mail in ballots. Like, it'll be like a tidal wave that'll bring him in. And I'll say this, and I'm going to say it publicly. If that was to happen, they kill him. He doesn't last a year. And then America changes.
Well, there's
That
gonna
will
be a
be the
civil war,
biggest
Joe.
mistake of their life. If
But
they
yeah, but
make him a
remember,
martyr.
is it Joe? We talk about it all the time about the left, okay, and their goals, their strategies, their ideologies. We brought that up on the show a million times at the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe, the violence at the end of the day, the end game of violence in America, violence in the streets. That's what they want. They want the disruption. They want the chaos so that they could basically make the argument by instilling fear. Look, we saw it during COVID. They instilled fear in people, and people gave the government all sorts of power. Gretchen Whitmer up in Michigan, and the other guy in Illinois. I forgot his name. I really don't care to remember his name. Murphy in Jersey, Cuomo, all of them. Newsom. Out of the fear, they took all sorts of power to themselves. They'll do the same thing in a hot civil war. They'll do the same damn thing. They'll just take more and more power for themselves. But that's ultimately what they want. I think the right genuinely, not everybody, genuinely wants this country to survive. I think the left wants it destroyed. And I think ultimately the right does not want violence. And I think the left does. And we're going to show some examples of that. Okay. And by the way, when the violence comes from the left, they also want you without guns. That's a no-brainer to me. You and I have said on the show, Joe, a million times, okay? I don't own a gun. I'm probably going to get one. I'm in Arizona. I could just walk down the street and buy one, okay? So, and I could get one for my wife. Bottom line is I'm in Arizona. I'm probably going to get one, but I'm not a fist in the air NRA member. But the fact is they are unhinged about guns. They're using shootings like this transgender animal that shot those kids and the people in Nashville. Now, we're going to talk about that in a little bit. They want to use events like that to say, we got to take the guns. We got to take the guns. They can't show a causal relationship, Joe, between me owning a gun or you owning a gun and a school shooting by a transvestite. Okay. They can't show a causal relationship. They just have to yell. So we're going to play the clip of a congressman who goes completely unhinged in the hallway in the House of Representatives.
Cowards, they're gutless. They're not here. I'm talking about gun violence.
You know, there's never been
I'm talking about gun
a
violence.
school that allows teachers to carry.
Carry guns? You think more guns lead to more death? More guns lead to more death. Look at the data. You're not looking at any data.
They're not. No. The fact is, you're not looking at anything, Congressman, other than your ideology. Tom Massey is there trying to make Joe. Here, let me throw this out to you, okay? So, if let's say, for argument's sake, my little guy was in public school, or even the school he's at now, because charter schools here are technically public schools, okay? If they said they're putting in a metal detector, if they had an armed security guard, I'd be like, yeah, sure, why not? Like Frankie Pentangeli in The Godfather Part 2, he says, yeah, sure, why not? Why not? Why not? That's a sensible thing to say. And look at the unhinged rant that this guy goes on when Massey just simply says, yeah, well, if we had armed guards, he'd go, more guns in school. More guns in school. You see what they do, Joe? They're bullies. They get in your face because they can't win an argument, Joe
Well,
Rossinello.
I'll tell you what, I've been watching on Facebook. Obviously, this is a sensitive subject. There are people that sincerely believe, they're sincere, that they believe that guns are the result of this situation. You see, I don't. I don't have a gun. I'm gonna be very forthright. Don't support the NRA as far as money or anything like that. And I'm gonna use two examples. One, Chicago. Chicago has the strictest gun laws maybe in the nation. It's also the most violent city in the nation. One of. I know New Orleans right now is the murder capital of America, but Chicago is a very violent place. Really strict gun laws. Two, there have always been guns in this country. Always. 100 years. 100 years. Why now? Why? What has changed? My opinion. This is my opinion. I'm entitled to it. Broken families. Broken families, no fathers in the family, high, what's it called? Mental illness amongst people and the children and adults, and people are isolated because of the internet. That is my opinion. There are wounded people. These people are mentally ill. That girl in Nashville was mentally ill and it was ignored. A lot of these people were mentally ill and it was ignored. That's the difference. The guns were always here, guys. 60 years ago, there was just as many guns. I don't have one, and I'm just as sincere as you may be. But I'm going to tell you, that's my opinion. If you're sick in the head to do something like that, you'll do it another way. You'll drive a car into people. You could stab people. You could do a Timothy McVeigh situation.
Right.
You're sick. To do something like that, you are so off. And I got news for you. It's going to continue because my personal opinion, it stems from a broken family and doesn't have a father in the house.
No, listen,
That's
you're
my
absolutely,
opinion, and I'm
Joe,
entitled
listen.
to it.
And by the way, I want to bolster my argument about how this is just a lot of showmanship and a lot of political theater by the left. Do you remember when Timothy McVeigh got arrested? Okay, and all the anti-death penalty liberals went on TV and said, "I remember Ted Kennedy like it was yesterday. You know, I'm opposed to the death penalty, but if there was ever a case where it was warranted, this is the one." You see how they made an exception? Because Timothy McVeigh, they painted as some right-wing extremist, and they couldn't sit on we're against the death penalty. They wanted him dead. And Ted Kennedy and the rest of them, Joe, it was all over the media saying the same line. It was just, if there was ever a case, this is the one. Now, I did a video this week with that. I don't want to call him a name. I promised you I won't call people names on the show. But Cenk Uygur, whatever his name is, from the Young Turks, he did the same thing, Joe. He did the same thing. He did a video and said, look, he's a big blowhard. Look, I'm against guns. I mean, I'm for assault weapons bans. I'm for all the bans. But this group of people is being attacked by hundreds of laws, and I blew a gasket. I'm like, no, laws you could fight against by rallying other people to enact new laws if you get enough people to agree with you. But they're not being attacked. What I did see last week was a transvestite who's mentally ill, okay, go in a Christian school and kill 6 people. But my argument, Joe, that's why I brought up Timothy. Well, I brought up Timothy McVeigh because you mentioned him. And the argument about the death penalty is the same thing as Uyghur's argument about guns. All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. He'll be the guy, Joe, that takes away your gun or my gun or the 300 million guns in America. But some people, Joe, are more equal than others. And right now, the trans group, that whole community, if you want to call them that, they're the most violent people in this country. They're saying it, Joe. They're saying that they're willing to do all sorts of things. In the meantime, all these lefties, Joe Rossinello, they can't point out not one example of real violence against transgenders at all. Not one. Because if they did, it'd be all over CNN and MSNBC.
But just to piggyback on something you said earlier, which I think is very important, the left that is anti-gun, they use these incidents. And let me first say this: some people are very sincere. And one could say this, that it is guns that kill these kids. Listen, it's a point of view. We could have that discussion, but politics never addresses root causes because, frankly, people live on the surface and they don't like to touch nerves. Politicians, a good politician, an ideologue will touch a nerve. We touch nerves, but we're talking heads. We're not politicians.
Right.
Politicians can't touch nerves because you might like attract one person, you'll push away five, and that's not the name of the game because they want to win. Under it is what you said. They don't want you to have guns, and it's not the ones that are going to hurt people. It's the fear
Right.
that on any given day they push people too far, like you saw in Canada, and 2 million people show up in Washington, D.C. with automatic weapons and basically say, you're leaving that house. And maybe the police say, you know something? We're going to side with you.
Let me ask you a question. Do you
That's
think
the biggest fear that they have
do you think that
ever.
you think the United States of America, Joe Rossinello, is immune from that?
Dude, that could happen anywhere, Joe.
Tomorrow it could happen.
It could happen, and that is their fear. That's why they don't want you. Listen, I'm not negating the argument with the kids. I'm not. Please don't misunderstand me because it's a horrible situation, and many people are very sincere. But what I just said, there are many people who have power who are terrified by the mere fact that there are many people in this country that have guns and know how to use them. And if they were pushed too far, like you saw in Canada with those trucks, show up in Washington, D.C., and the police basically say, we're not going to do anything about it. We're just like the police that happened in Minneapolis, St. Paul.
Right, with BLM and
They
Antifa.
just say, we're not going to do
We're
anything
not doing anything
about
about this.
and then it's on. That scares them to death. That's why they want. That is the biggest driver to take your gun away.
Well, Joe,
Now,
what they
and
want,
I'm not a gun carrier.
I know,
But I have
I know.
eyes, and I know what's in their head.
Joe, I know. Look, at the end of the day, all of these school shootings, again, I am in agreement with you. They're all tragic, okay? But what they all have in common is they're all Reichstag moments, okay? The Nazis burned down the Reichstag, and then they blamed the enemies of the state to get the people on their side. It's that these are all Reichstag moments. You see, when your kid goes to school, they could get shot, just like this person. Maybe you should give us your guns. Like Beto O'Rourke, I could see a guy like him saying, yeah, hell yeah, I'm coming after your AK-47. You go down there to Texas. I'll tell you what, Beto, go down to your part of Texas where they're Democrats at the border, Hispanics. You know what they own? Guns. They ain't giving them to you, Beto. And they're not right-wingers. They're Democrats, okay? You think you're going to walk into somebody's house and take their gun. It's not going to happen. They can instill as much fear as they want. It's not going to happen. But go ahead, Joe. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, I don't think it's embedded in this culture. There's ways to do it. You see, if I was going to do it, you do it through ESG policies. You penalize people and you make it a financial burden to own the gun. That's how you do it.
But then you have to have a political reaction to that. You have to vote, and people are going to do something about
That's
that.
why
Shut that down.
ESG is dangerous, Joe, because ESG is the tool of the state to
Right.
work around the Constitution.
Right.
See, that's why Biden just vetoed that bill. It was a bipartisan bill. ESG is dangerous. People
Sure
don't
is.
even know what it is. ESG is environmental, social, and governance.
Governance, yeah.
It's basically where the state, we could use an example. You go out, you don't have a gun, say you're going to buy a gun. Say you buy it with a credit card. And the credit card company shares that with the government. So then the government sends you a letter and says, Joe, you just bought this gun. There's a new law on the books. It's $5,000 a year to have that gun in your house. And I need that money in 30 days. And then if you don't pay it, there's a warrant out for your arrest.
I think if they did that, Joe, that would be like your March on Washington example. there would be outright civil
I'm
war.
just saying, like, that's how they that's
Right, and
how
that's how
you do it.
well, that's how they're getting away with a lot
But
of other
that's how,
stuff.
like, you don't have to go into people's houses. It's financial violence. And if you don't pay it, they garnish your wages.
I remember years ago, my father, God rest his soul, my father used to get Playboy magazine, and he was the typical Italian guy. I'm just reading the articles. I'm just reading the articles, all right? But there was an article I remember at the time, all right, because they got, in fairness to the magazine part of it, they actually got a lot of well-respected writers to write columns in their magazine aside from all the other stuff, okay? The article was, this got to be in the mid 80s, with a picture of a guy, but rather than a swastika, it says IRS, but he looks like a Nazi. And it says, the most powerful agency of the federal government is not the FBI, is not the CIA. It is the IRS.
There you go.
They could be directed, as Obama showed us. Obama
Ab-
threw that, dipped his toe in that water, Joe.
Absolutely agreed. And that's how you do it. Like, because the law, let's be honest, Michael Bloomberg threw hundreds of millions of dollars at the Second Amendment and failed. It's not going anywhere. Those who want to attack it in that avenue aren't thinking. How you attack it is how I just attacked it. And you could have some success there because it becomes a financial terrorism. You basically say, you want that? You're going to pay for it. I'm going to make you pay.
Well, then there has to be, and you, God willing, would believe that there would be a political reaction to that.
Well, possibly, but
That's a big one,
I mean,
Joe.
I can't predict the future, but that's the way to attack it.
Well,
Like
Joe,
just like what they did with those truckers, they froze
Yeah.
their bank accounts.
right. No, I agree. Let's but we got to keep this going because I mean, this week, Joe, it's all kind of been intertwined. Joe Pasillo and Joe Rossinello at the front line with Joe and Joe. If you're listening to us, please help us out wherever you could. We don't ask you for money, but if you're watching us on Twitter, follow us, YouTube, Frontline TV, wherever, Frontline TV News, like, subscribe, share. Just help us out a little bit. Help spread it. And you've been doing so. And we really appreciate that immensely. Now, I'd like to ask this question. You think Brett Kavanaugh might have wanted to own a gun on the day that this happened? So you want to watch these protesters on Kavanaugh's street.
U.S. Marshals assigned to protect Supreme Court justices last summer were told to avoid arresting protesters demonstrating outside several justices' homes. Attorney General Merrick Garland was confronted with documents outlining the Marshals' training not to make arrests after the top Biden official previously said the DOJ didn't prosecute protesters because U.S. Marshals made no arrests.
Now, here's the thing, Joe. You got a guy that gets first of all, they excused all the protests, and I will credit the Republican senators, even though they're not really going to be able to do much about it. Cruz, Mike Lee, excuse me, Josh Hawley, they really put the screws to Merrick Garland. They really did. Now, whether or not something comes of it, he's an ideologue. He's backed by the ideologues in the Senate, okay? But they asked him straight out. They said, these people broke the law. You're not supposed to protest in front of any judge's house to
That's the point, Joe.
affect an outcome. Nor are you supposed to protest in front of a juror's house. Why? Because that's a threat. You think Brett Kavanaugh, in light of this, we're finding out the marshals were told not to even arrest anybody. Joe, if they were on my block and I own a gun and they come moving towards my house, there won't even be a question. You want it for me? For me? Not for me. All right, I'm not willing. I'm going to defend myself. For my wife and my son, to defend them against these, and they are, Joe, they're animals. We're going to show a clip in a little while, all right, of a tranny up in Canada, okay, in a little bit. They're violent. These are the faces of the violent revolutionaries, Joe, and guess what? With what they're doing now, and they're really pushing it to the hilt, there's a lot of people saying, you know, if I even entertained giving up my gun, I ain't going to do it. I ain't doing it, Joe. And listen, I don't care what these idiots say in Washington, we have a weaponized Department of Justice. There is no two cents about it.
That's unarguable. We can list a million
about
examples of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And
But
my thing
in
about
terms of the Kavanaugh deal, your point, it's illegal what they did. They should have been arrested. That's on the books. That clip. If we played it a little longer, it lays that out. You cannot protest at a Supreme Court justice's home. They should have been arrested. That's
Right.
number one. Number two, why didn't they find the leaker? Because they didn't want to.
They didn't want to.
How in this country, I use this example, I'll say it again. We found Saddam Hussein in a hole in the middle of the desert. This is the most, dude, our policing, our army, our surveillance is so advanced. You're going to tell me you can't find that leaker? And they didn't, and they dropped it. That was a disgrace.
Right.
A disgrace. Someone could have died because of that. And it was dropped.
Right.
Disgrace. But
Because with them,
horrible.
Joe, the church teaches about consequentialism, okay? That you can never say that the ends justify the means if the means by which you achieve that end, no matter how good it might be, means that you have to commit a sin or commit any sort of evil in order to achieve that means. We as, I think, conservatives, okay, as Catholics, I don't believe in the ends justify the means. I don't believe in that Machiavellian concept that is always thrown out there by gangsters and people in politics. And well, the ends justify the means. No, they don't. And if you're doing something wrong, and I don't agree with their goals on the left, obviously, but even if they were good and noble goals, you don't just get what you want. The whole point of the Constitution, Joe, is so that we don't have a government that uses all the means possible to achieve an end. There's checks, there's balances, there's people that put up their hand and say, you can't do that. All right. But what you have now in this country, both in the government, Joe, and in academia, okay, and the media, is you have them pushing the idea that no, the ends justify the means. That's why I mentioned Cenk Uygur earlier, because he's saying that if any group of people in America should own guns, it should be trannies, okay? Now, what I just said, he would call an attack on them. He would say that your attack, that's an act of violence. Therefore, he wants to give them a gun so that they could shoot me. I didn't commit violence against them. I used words. But people like him, and that is what's going on with the media. That's going on with social media. That's going on with the universities. Joe, the ends are justifying the means to achieve what? I mean, I really don't know. But let's play. We're going to play a clip. This is a professor. This is a professor at a public university, Joe. And listen to what he had to say. What should be done to right-wing speakers, so-called right-wing speakers.
This post that has the English professor at Wayne State University off the job, at least for now. On Stephen Shaviro's personal Facebook page this month, the professor, philosopher, and writer addressed right-wing speakers being allowed to speak on university campuses, starting with, "So here is what I think about free speech on campus." Shaviro writes in part, quote, "Although I do not advocate violating federal and state criminal codes, I think it is far more admirable to kill a racist, homophobic, or transphobic speaker than it is to shout them down," end quote.
Joe Resinello, now you want to talk about what the end is here, what the goal is here? He's got to lose his job. The only way to push back against these professors, number one, is tenure's got to be revisited. You get no federal money from, they shouldn't get federal money anyway, but you'll get no federal money unless you reform your tenure track program that give these people the immunity from saying, so that they could say whatever they want. Joe, this guy needs to be fired, but guess what? He ain't gonna be. They'll hope that they brush it under the rug. Okay, we won't hear about it in the news. They won't, because CNN's not going to carry this guy's words. MSNBC is not going to carry these guys' words. Okay, this guy's words, and he gets us to say, you know what? Don't shout them down. Shoot them. What happens? What happens if Michael Knowles goes to a university and one of these little idiots picks up a gun, like this transsexual in Nashville, picks up a gun and says, "Mike Knowles is my enemy. That professor told me it'd be more admirable to shoot him than to shout him down," and puts a bullet in Mike Knowles' head. Who's going to be held? Who's going to be held to account for that? Joe Resinello. Who's going to be held to account?
Well, I'll tell you what, we're getting close to that because people are unhinged. They're not grounded in reality. I mean, even let's talk reality. There are two genders. That's science, guys. Sorry. You could basically construe it any way you want. Science says that it's in every cell of your body, an X and a Y chromosome. They're not in reality. We're getting there. to say that it's biased, like, do you imagine if a conservative was to say that?
Oh,
Holy crap. But that's a given. They don't care. I mean, it's not even worth mentioning that there's hypocrisy and there's a double standard. People don't care. You always use this example. They shot Steve Scalise. They shot him. Our country,
they stabbed Rand Paul's assistant.
there you go. And and people are okay with that. That's the sick part. You see, the difference between the people you call me a fascist or a hater, I don't advocate violence. And I got news for you. If someone like AOC was hurt, I would speak out against it. That's not the country we have or should have. The difference is I will not get the same respect.
Right.
There is no question in my mind that there are people across this nation who would hear my voice as a Catholic. And I'll put this to anybody, anything that I say, maybe I could say it better, but I like to think I speak as a Catholic when it comes to teaching and doctrine. They hate me because of that. If I was put in prison because of my belief system, they'd have no problem with that. They would not lose a second of sleep, not a millisecond of sleep. If they took all my property, froze my bank account, blackballed me from working, they would not lose a second of sleep. That's the problem. Because
of course it's a
as
problem.
Jim Jordan has said, that could come back at you. Believe me when I tell you, political times change. All it is one event that could take place and things can flip. And then they're coming after you.
The only
And then
problem
what
is,
are you
Joe,
going
they
to
have the
say?
media. The only problem is they have the media. They always get because you're right. You're absolutely right. You're spot on. The problem is, Joe, how much of this nonsense do they know they could get away with because of a willing media? We played a clip of that congressman yelling at Tom Massey, calling Republicans cowards. You're the coward because you won't address the situation you won't bring your ideology down to reality and talk about real solutions. You just want to get in there and you want to scream your head off. And by the way, did you notice his tough guy stance? Did you notice him flexing through the suit? No, did you catch that part? See, that's a bully, Joe. Just like Cenk Uyghur that I mentioned earlier. These are bullies. And you know what they came up against in Donald Trump and why they're indicting him on Tuesday? He's a bigger bully than them. He punches the bully in the face. You want to know how you know that? Because when he gets in, I'm convinced that some of these states are going to do something about their laws. I am. Or the Supreme Court's going to take action. And I believe that Donald Trump's going to win by he's going to get like 90 million votes. And there's no way there's going to be any anomalies because you won't be able to pull that off. There's going to be such an overwhelming. And you know what he's going to do on day one? He's going to fire 100,000 federal workers. He's going to take away the 87,000 IRS agents that just got hired. Okay. He is going to abolish the Department of Education, and he's going to really go after the FBI and the CIA. That's why they're going to kill him. And the media, to put the cherry on this Sunday, Joe Rossinello, the media will justify his assassination. You mark my words.
But I'll tell you this. I don't think he's going to win. I want him to, and I'll publicly say I am voting for Donald Trump over anyone, DeSantis, anyone. And I will vote for him in the general. I don't think he will. Only an event will take him there. And if that does happen, Joe, they will kill him. But here's the thing. That's the event that fixes America. That will be a backfire like you have because I'll tell you what, no matter who the president is, you can't kill him or her. You can't.
Joe, they don't know the word can't. They don't know the word can't.
No, but the problem is there's a backlash. Like, you could say anything you want, but that's where, here's another thing. You get Donald Trump ×2. And the Emergency Act is now used against you. We're arresting you on The View. You can't say that. We're arresting you.
Right. If you advocate violence.
That's my point. That's where it could go That's what I'm saying, how they are not thinking.
I would love that. Not for that. I know that all the left is all gleeful because Tuesday they think they're going to see Trump in a perp walk, which ain't going to happen. I doubt it's going to happen with the Secret Service or a mugshot. I would give a lot to see Joy Behar on a perp walk.
No, but
I
I'm just
really
saying,
would.
I don't even she's non-incidental. I don't even to be honest with you, that show is just trash. But in terms of I'm just talking about how something could like, dude, they shut CNN down. They say you're basically it's sedition. The president was just killed.
Right.
Like, this is what I'm saying. Like,
Right.
there are things that could like push people, like the government. They just use it as an example, just like what they did with the pandemic. You basically say, well, two could play at this game. You just killed the president. Guess what? I'm shutting you down because it's an emergency. The country, there's violence. It's martial law. Holy crap. Did he just say that? Yes, that could happen.
No, sure it could happen.
And this
Sure
is
it
what
could
I'm
happen.
saying. They're foolish what they're doing. Clarence Thomas said it when Pennsylvania changed the election law outside of the legislature. Read the dissent. He said this is dangerous. You have a judge that's making a decision that the people are entitled to make through the people they vote for. And the court didn't take it.
Right.
Clarence said that was dangerous. He's right.
Well, that was
100%.
John Roberts. That's all John
Well,
Roberts.
John Roberts is a political hack, if
Okay.
you ask me.
No,
A hack.
listen, he's proven him. Look, he's proven himself.
Hack.
You know what he does? He throws the easy cases to the conservatives. Okay. Well, when it came to a difficult case like that, which would have changed the election, by the way, that would have changed the election. Okay. If they heard that case and they said, well, no, a judge doesn't have the right to do that, nor does the Secretary of State, nor does the governor. The state legislature makes the laws. That's what the Constitution says. The election would turn out different. I will say this. Even more like it's nauseating because what you just described is Donald Trump becoming some sort of a martyr, which he can very well be. You know, Father James Martin was seizing on that a couple weeks ago, but somebody was comparing Donald Trump or the persecution of Trump and bringing up Jesus Christ. And Martin got all in a tizzy. He blocked me, by the way, Joe. I consider it a badge of honor. Father James Martin blocked me on Twitter, said you can no longer, correspond to him, whatever. But yeah, that's why I think Trump could be the man for this moment. I want to play a couple guys in Great Britain seem to get it. We're going to play a short clip from them talking about the danger of this trans ideology, who, by the way, Joe, are the new revolutionary faces in America.
Trans Day of Vengeance, and it says stop trans genocide. So these people actually think there's a genocide of trans people. Now, whether some people are disingenuously spreading that, or whether they actually genuinely believe it in some sort of deluded
They're
state.
disingenuinely spreading it, and then people genuinely
and then certain people believe it. Especially if they're mentally disturbed, they then do crazy things. So it's completely, it's terrible. And obviously, vengeance, generally not great. Maybe if it's John Wick or a Clint Eastwood Western, but generally not a great thing to have a day of vengeance.
then they are later saying, oh no, it's about unity, not inciting violence.
Yes.
Vengeance is not the word for that.
And this comes from the Trans Radical Activist Network. There was another thing, trans resistance.
So Joe Resinello, they're talking about everything that happened over the last couple of weeks. You have this woman in Australia, Posey Parker is her name. They attacked her physically. They attacked her. They're calling for violence against J.K. Rowling. Okay. Now, J.K. Rowling obviously is not a right-wing conservative. They're calling for violence against her. I couldn't find the clip. I ran through it on Twitter. I couldn't find the clip, Joe. My part of me gets very angry at these people. The other part of me says, I'm trying to see in their heart. I really am. Joe, they're either so wounded, so broken, or they're so evil. Because this girl, or this guy who thinks he's a girl, was calling for violence, direct violence, not calling a he a she and a she a he, the way they're trying to make violence. All right, if you misgender me, it's an act of violence. No, it's not. No, it's not. This was actual violence being called for. Same thing happened, like I said, with J.K. Rowling. Same thing happened where they're saying outright, as we mentioned earlier with the guns, some people are more open, are more equal than others. All animals equal. Some animals are more equal than others. That's what they want. They want the trans activists with the gun in their hands to kill people like Posey Parker and kill people like J.K. Rowling. J.K. Rowling's a feminist. She's got a tattoo of Baphomet on her arm. She's not a conservative. She's not a Christian. And you know what they're calling them, Joe? Trans exterminating radical feminists or trans exclusive radical feminists. Mike Knowles came under a lot of heat, and he said something absolutely true. Transgenderism as an ideology needs to be eradicated from our American language, both in the culture and in our legal system and in our politics. I'm paraphrasing him. And Joe, I seem to think I heard somebody else say that before. Oh, I think it might be Joe Rossinello and Joe Pasillo at the front line. We said the ideology needs to be eradicated from our laws because, Joe, they're going to excuse any act of violence that these people perpetrate. They're going to excuse it. And these guys in Britain, Joe, you could get arrested for this stuff, for talking the way these guys do, okay? Because we're seeing it in Canada. We saw a couple cases over the last few months where people speaking out against this have been arrested, can't go into a library where Slade and all these crazy names that these trannies come up with. In other words, where you say, I don't want this in front of kids. They're going to take it to a whole new level, and we got to be careful about it, Joe.
Well, I'll tell you what. Bad choice of words. A day of vengeance. I agree.
Day of
with
vengeance.
that. I mean, they canceled. That was supposed to take place this weekend in D.C. It was canceled. They had to, obviously, because of the Nashville incident. I mean, and that's my point, where even like in a liberal area like D.C., they're like, we can't do this. There's certain things you just can't do, and you can't do that. But even before, obviously, they couldn't, they didn't know that the Nashville event was going to take place. This was planned. Day of vengeance.
What the hell is that?
Right. I mean, like, come on. Like, I don't even know how that's even, like, let's put it this way. I'm the bureaucrat that signs off on your permit to come into my office. You have to get your stupid permit to go demonstrate, and you pay your $50, whatever. You come in, I'm like, all right, when you want it, where's it going to be? Okay, it's going to be here. What's it called? Day of Vengeance.
No.
Like, I don't care what the cause is. I don't care who you are. Like, what's the demonstration? It's the Trans Day of Vengeance. What? Well,
who are you going to take vengeance on?
I didn't hear that.
Are you going to be armed? Are you going to be armed?
No, you can't do that. I mean,
no, that's my point. Cenk Uygur says you can.
No way.
He says you can. He says,
like in Canada, they called it the Day of Unity. Okay, you want to call that? And I'll be honest with you. You want to have a demonstration? Go for it. This is a democracy. Have at it. But as my friend Herschel Walker, i.e., I liked Herschel Walker as a person, he said a demonstration is you show up at 9, you go home at 5. You fill out your permits, you stay within the boundaries, and you go home. Right. That's a peaceful protest. Anything outside of that, you're getting arrested. I don't care what your cause is. You don't have a right to hurt people. You don't have a right to destroy property, and you don't have to have a day of vengeance. Sorry.
Well, think about it this way. Think about what you don't have the right to do that now they say you do have the right to do. Think about how upside down, Joe Rossinello, our country is right now. What you do have the right to do is call your protest the National Day of Vengeance. That's a threat as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, 100%.
The answer is no as far as admit. Cenk Uygur says we're going to carve out an exception for you so you can own guns and kill all those Christians out there who really hate you by calling you a he because you were born with a penis rather than calling you a she, okay? They could do anything they want. They could shut you down on campus, okay? They can now, evidently, according to the professor that we played earlier, they could shoot you on campus and the left will justify it. That's what you can do. What you can't do is exercise your right to free speech. What if I wanted to have a national day of heterosexual unity? National Day of Heterosexual Unity. How about a day of heterosexual marriage unity between one man and one woman, and a bunch of 100,000 people show up in Washington, D.C.? How well do you think that's going to go over? If the other side showed up and shot into the crowd, all right, again, CNN, that college professor, Cenk Uygur, They would all justify it. We are not. Here's the summary of this, Joe, because we're coming up on the end in a little bit. We have a few minutes left. Stick with us. Is we are no longer living in a nation of laws. We live in a nation of men and women, okay, who make up the law as they go along, and the judges that will back them up. Less so under Trump, but nonetheless, those judges are still in place. We are a nation of people. We are not a nation of laws anymore. The law is out the window.
That's a good way to put it. It's becoming more and more so like that, Joe. And that should scare people, all people, because again, politics changes like the wind, my friends, and then they're coming after you. And it could happen. It should scare people. But again, you see, that's where the idea of shame, that's wrong, I'm objective, Joe, it's all gone. That's all gone because people are not grounded in reality. And people, frankly, are a lot of times justifying their own, to be honest with you, bad decisions and bad lifestyle. And they're not going to do that because to speak out against those things is to basically speak out against themselves.
Right.
They're not going to do it.
Right.
Even if they're dead wrong, even if the facts say otherwise, no matter how you lay it out, no matter what you say, they'll compartmentalize it, they will ignore it, and they will vote according to their identity anyway.
Right.
And there we have it.
Well, that's it. Well, listen, we all know that's all we've been talking about today is, yes, what's going on with Donald Trump. He's going to be indicted on Tuesday. Evidently, we'll see how that shakes out. But the rest of the show tonight, Joe, we talk about violence, about guns, violence from this group, Cenk Uyghur, violence from the trannies. Let me tell you something. Ben Shapiro, guys, who was a couple of years ago, it's a famous clip out there. Zoe something, 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 a male of the species who dresses like a female, ex-military. They were on one of the Hollywood shows. And Ben Shapiro said, I don't think society should legalize, I'm paraphrasing, should legalize a disorder, a delusion, he called it. And Zoe something, 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 who's a guy, and a pretty big guy, too. I mean big muscular, not just big fat, okay? Put his arm around Ben Shapiro and said, you keep talking like that, you're going to go home in an ambulance. Now, that's the tolerant left. Ben Shapiro's about this thin. What's he going to do to this guy? He stated a truth. We're not going to adjust society because of your delusion. Play this clip, all right, that we're going to show up in Canada about somebody who's standing on the same firm ground, and watch the reaction of these wonderful, loving, down-to-earth people. Let's run the clip.
I mean, it's clearly was aggressive violence.
You suck. You suck. You're not wanted.
Popular conservative activist, Billboard Chris, appeared to be violently assaulted by aggressive transgender activists at a pro-trans rally in Vancouver, Canada yesterday. Though police seemed to break up the assault after it began, the militant trans rally-goer from assaulting him beyond making sure he wasn't injured more in the attack. He also spoke to one of the officers monitoring the rally that day, who argued that both sides were at fault, pushing back on the conservatives' claim that he was peacefully protesting at the trans rally.
My dog.
Guys exercising his right to free speech. Did you see the anger, the hatred on that guy's
hurt,
face?
Dude, that's deep hurt on those people. It doesn't justify what he did. And there's other clips. I did a short on it. A cop being confronted who was there, basically rationalizing almost the behavior of that guy, saying, well, they were shouting in his face, and the guy was like, no, they
were not.
That's exact. You should see that piece of it, that the police, it was a woman, blonde-headed woman, cop, it's all over Twitter. dude, Joe, we're in a different place in America. I'm telling you, man, like common sense is not so common times 10. People are irrational to the point of almost madness. It is insane.
Joe, let me ask you a question. You're more level-headed than I am, okay? And I'll admit that. And I said this before at the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe, I'm no hero. Never pretend to be. I was many occasions I had in front of these people, them yelling in your face. I never got assaulted. I never really saw anybody assaulted when I used to go to the prayer vigil downtown Manhattan. With Father Fidelis and the group of Catholics praying in front of Planned Parenthood, okay? But I've seen their tactics. I've seen how they get in their face. Now, this guy coming up to Billboard Chris, whatever his name is, okay, is doing what those people did. The only difference is rather than saying F you, yeah, F you, you suck, not getting anywhere, credit to the Billboard gentleman, okay, then they get violent. And then, as you said, the blonde chick, the cop, turns around and tries to justify that. There's no justification for that. And when I say that you're more level-headed than I am, Joe, if that guy did that to me, I'm going to be honest with you. I do not know how I would react. I do not know. If that guy shoved me from behind and tried to assault me, I don't know how I would react. Depends on if they kept coming. I really don't. And that's what they're banking on. They're banking on people who don't question their reaction, like I just did, and just react so that they could get it on tape, get it on video, post it all over social media, send it into CNBC, send it into MSNBC, send it into CNN, and now you got your hateful right-winger. But they won't show the part where this guy actually pushed the conservative and really shoved him hard, worthy of a punch. I mean, any day in our lifetimes, you would have saw somebody retaliate. This guy, to his credit, didn't. Joe, my larger question, I don't know how I would have reacted.
Well, here's the thing. The police should have arrested before that escalated. It was getting crazier.
Right.
You're a cop. You're standing right there. They didn't do their job. That's number one. Like if I was like a senior police officer and saw footage of that, everybody who was there, I would call them into a room and be like, you didn't do your job.
Right.
This was escalating. Where were you?
Right.
Where were you to get this guy out of his face? That's number one. Number two, Joe, that's getting no play anywhere in the mainstream media.
Right.
I mean, we expect that. And then in Canada to boot, and I've done a number of shorts on it, C11, Justin Trudeau's controlling social media soon. He's invested in that globally, and he's also passed legislation in Parliament. Now I believe it's in the Senate, and it's probably going to pass. So my point is, this is not shown to people. What we just showed people, Joe, isn't shown to people. And sadly, there are people who could watch what we just put forth and say he deserved it.
Right.
And almost that's what the cop.
That's what they're doing.
She didn't say that. I don't want to put words in her mouth, but her tone was like, well, what do you expect? No, ma'am. No, he has a right to be there too. It's a democracy. And he's not in his face. It was the opposite.
Right.
But
What I saw, I remember down at Planned Parenthood, there was one of the officers there. I'm talking about a higher up in the police department because it was a once a month event and it got pretty hairy a couple times. Okay. And I saw a moderately tall, not too tall, like a little on the short side, Hispanic guy. Joe, he had all on the ribbons. He had on the shield, the gold shield. This guy was a somebody. And he's standing on the sidewalk. He's looking at us. Maybe he was Catholic. Maybe he wasn't. Maybe he was pro-life. Maybe he was pro-abortion. I don't know. What I do know is this. We're all standing on the sidewalk being harassed. We're on the sidewalk, okay? And we're praying the rosary, okay? We're praying for the people involved. We're praying for the babies. We're praying for the people in Planned Parenthood. And one of the pro-choice New York radicals, really with the vein popping out of his head, he was like one of their ringleaders. Don't get me started on the level of anger I could get to thinking about this guy, all right? The cop at one point, this guy is peppering him with questions. At one point, the cop turns around and he says, shut the F up. Those people are praying. They're not being violent. You get on the other side of the street or else I'm going to arrest you. And guess what he did, Joe? He walked to the other side of
But
the
that's exactly what a cop's job is to do.
right.
Because
Didn't arrest
here's
him.
the-
Didn't arrest him. Didn't take sides. He
No,
just said, "Get out of my face. Those people are praying. You're not going to say they're being violent.
that's right.
Go over there, or I will
And
arrest you."
that's not being intolerant. That's not being a fascist. That's basically like, dude, get out of my space because I'm a cop and I have authority.
Right.
Number one. Number two, they're not doing anything to you. And they have a right to be here, and so do you. You stay there, they stay here. You say your deal, they say yours, and then both of you get the frig out of here.
Now, I like the way you put that. Get the
And
frig
that's
outta
it.
here. So we're going to leave it there. I will tell you this. Anybody who decides they want to listen to the Frontline with Joe and Joe and what we have to say, don't give them the political theater that they want on Tuesday. Do not go to New York and protest. They're going to put in actors with you, Antifa types to mingle with you, to cause problems, to cause riots, just like they did in Charlottesville, just they did on January 6th. Don't fall for the trap. Trump's got the best lawyers in the world. Whatever is going to be done is going to be done, okay? Don't go down there. Don't go to Trump Tower. Don't go down to 100 Center Street, okay? Stay away. Don't give them what they want. And I mean that sincerely from my heart. I think Joe Rossinello would agree with me wholeheartedly. Let's see how this plays out. Joe Rossinello, I think that was an important conversation. We need to put the violence in its perspective and see exactly where it's coming from. So we want to thank you all for joining us at the Frontline with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, Joe Rossinello, we went way in the breach. Please, 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 any place you see us, please, Rumble. We're on Rumble. We're on Twitter. We're particularly trying to build up Twitter. At With Joe and Joe, at With Joe and Joe, the Frontline TV and all the associated channels on YouTube, Facebook. We've grown a lot in our audience on Facebook. Please help us. Please help us out by liking, subscribing, sharing, send us a friend request, whatever the case might be. We love the fact that you've been supporting us up till now. You're helping us get to the next level, and we know that we're going to continue to move in that direction and provide you with the content you want. Stay tuned during the week for some shorter videos. Joe Rossinello has been hammering on Prime Minister Trudeau, all right, and really exposing his nonsense and showing evidence of what he's doing. And I've been a little bit more eclectic. We got a lot of videos on our pages for you to enjoy. Please share them with your friends. Remember, until the next time, that God bless you, number one, and number two, our conversation is your conversation, and that conversation is going on everywhere. We'll talk to you soon. Tired of doing business with companies who don't share or support your beliefs? Then you need to switch from your current phone company to Charity Mobile. Charity Mobile is the pro-life phone company. 5% of your monthly plan goes to support the pro-life, pro-family charity of your choice. There are no contracts, and Charity Mobile makes it very easy to switch. Act now, because for a limited time, new customers who mention the offer code Joe and Joe get a free phone with free activation and free shipping. Chat with us online at CharityMobile.com or call us at 877-474-3662.